welcome all, and thank you for joining us today for our NURA online lecture on 2020 trends in the communication profession. My name is Alex Buhmann. I'm an associate professor at BI Norwegian Business School and director of the Nordic Alliance for Communication and Management, NURA for short. NURA was formed earlier this year by a group of senior communications executives and researchers from Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and Finland, and is in a way a continuation of something that many of you will know as the BI Center for Corporate Communication, a Norwegian research group that was led by Professor Peggy Brunn, who is with us in the panel today, for over 13 years. So NURA basically focuses on exploring communications as a strategic driver of sustainable organizational performance and success. We support, we develop and disseminate research that goes into this field. And as a group, we specifically focus on bridging communication and management perspectives, but also on developing research in and for the Nordic region. To this aim, we gather communication executives and researchers to jointly identify topics, emerging trends, and then based on that, develop a research agenda to develop new knowledge, to then disseminate our findings, insights to shape the debate on communication management in the Nordic countries. And as part of this, we've also developed for this year this 5-part lecture series that you're part of today. We also serve as the regional research partner for the European Communication Monitor, which is, of course, the largest regular study of the communications field worldwide, and is in fact sort of the only global project of its kind, as it now works in conjunction with the North American, Latin American, and Asia Pacific communication monitors. Every year, exploring trends in the communication profession, trying to shed light on where the field is moving in communication agencies, public sector communication, but also corporate communications. It's now in its 14th annual edition, runs across 44 countries, and has a good coverage of the Nordic region with 12%. And what we want to do in this first session, this first lecture today, is to really explore the ECM, European Communication Monitor results from this Nordic perspective, for which we have today 6 senior scholars on the panel. Before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping. So the session today will consist of 4 main parts. We have 3 topics to cover from the ECM: top strategic issues for communicators, dealing with emerging ethical issues, and then handling the age of crisis, specifically looking at cybersecurity as an issue. And then finally, we have about 10 minutes, hopefully more, Q&A at the end. And for that, we would ask you to please just, during the session, post your questions in the little Q&A function. We will monitor that function, collect the questions, and then use them to moderate a little bit the Q&A session with our panelists at the end. Finally, we are, of course, recording this lecture today, which we will make available to all NURA partners and their teams afterwards. If you're interested in becoming a partner of the Nordic Alliance for Communication and Management, please just visit our website and get in touch. So now, without further ado, I'll hand over to our first team to present the topic of strategic issues in communication. So that will be Professor Peggy Brunn here in Oslo, and then live from Sweden, also our colleague, Professor Katrin Johansson. There you go.
Good morning, everyone. Today, I'm going to talk about the results from the European Communication Monitor study of the most important issues facing communicators today. I'm going to do this with my colleague. Katrin's coming to us from Mid-Sweden University. So today I'm going to start off by looking at the top results, and then I'm going to go into what are the two particular issues facing organizations today, focusing on the top two, and then Katrin is going to come in and discuss the Nordic results. So we have the overall results from all 44 countries, and then Katrin will talk about what exactly the Nordic countries think about these issues. And then I will summarize what we have sort of discussed, what it may mean for you as communicators, and then look very, very briefly, like not at all, hardly, at the top hot issues facing us today. And yeah, so we'll make a note as we go along. So, excuse me, if you look at the overall charts, what's interesting here is to divide these issues into what are more or less skills-based issues and those which are more strategic issues facing an organization. If you look at, for example, using big data, it's important, but it's not as important as it used to be as people sort of, get these skills and they can move on. And if you go down all the way to the bottom, what's kind of interesting, considering some of the other results from the study that we'll come back to, is tackling gender issues on the individual or organization, professional level, are not important at all to communicators. And in my own personal opinion, I believe that this is going to come back and sort of haunt communicators. We'll come back to that. And what's interesting here, and what really popped out to me as I was looking at these results, was looking at them over time. And you can see how the importance of some go up, some go down, some stay kind of regular. But if you look at the top two issues, this is just remarkable, particularly when it comes to sustainability and social responsibility. Building trust has more or less been important for communicators, but if you look at the timeline, 2007 was the global financial crisis. So here we see an uptick, and then it goes down, and then it sort of levels off. And social responsibility and sustainability goes up, and then it basically goes in the basement for some reason. And then here comes Greta Thunberg in 2018 or 2019, excuse me, and it just goes back up again. And what's really important here is to understand that this data was collected in January and February. So this was before the coronavirus pandemic. So my hypothesis is that you will see these numbers go even higher when we do this again because of what's happening. I'll let Katrin now talk about the results, the overall results for the Nordic countries.
Yes, thank you, Peggy. As you can see from this table, you have in the first line there all countries where these communication professionals rank the top 3 issues, and 37.5% ranked sustainability and social responsibility as a top issue, and 41.6% ranked building and earning trust as one of the top 3 issues for the coming years. But you can see some interesting differences here between the Nordic countries. So, for example, if you go and look at the sustainability and social responsibility column, you can see that in Finland, that's the highest ranked number, whereas in Sweden, it's the lowest with 29%. So there are some differences there. And also building and earning trust, there are some differences between the countries, where Sweden goes in the top with 54% and Finland and Norway have slightly less with 39%. So we can speculate a little bit about why there are these differences. And I was thinking maybe that it could depend on if communication professionals that responded to these questions came from authorities and public organizations, or if they came from private companies, since we know that private companies tend to rank the sustainability issues higher than in public organizations. But we could really track that down, Peggy, for that, because Norway and Sweden, they are kind of opposite in their figures here, but their respondents were very similar. So we still are wondering a little bit about these differences, but it might be so that ranks the sustainability issue lower. And you had also an article a couple of years ago that answered to that, Peggy. Right, over to you, Beck.
Thank you very much. So we see that in some instances, for example, in Denmark, the earning trust is much more important to the Danish practitioners, and in Sweden, we don't know if it's significantly different. We really haven't done those kind of statistics, but and in Sweden, so we have to dig deeper into this. And if we look at 12%, so there's a lot of food for thought here, and good stuff for research for us. Now, if you want to summarize, what does this mean? And if you look at these issues, you take away the skills-based issues out of this, and you just discuss what are more strategic issues for the organization. You look at these things are not mutually exclusive. So you build trust by fulfilling expectations. Expectations are built by promises made from an organization. And today is particularly when it comes from environmental issues, societal issues, and corporate governance. So in order to fulfill expectations, you've got to link the business strategy and communication, because the communications people are the ones making the promises on behalf of the organization, if you will, or at least they're framing them and articulating them for the organization. And this strengthens the strategic role of the communication within the organizations. So all of these things go together, and it's really important to realize that and to approach your own organizations from this point of view. Now, if you look at what's happening today, June 26th, as a matter of fact, we are celebrating Gay Pride. And the number of companies has sort of jumped on this bandwagon. Everybody is now for Gay Pride. Black Lives Matter. Who knew that this unrest of a subject in the United States would spread internationally? And it is. And then you have sustainability issues and circular economy. And of course, the COVID-19 opened up a whole huge can of issues that organizations are going to be having to deal with, not the least workplace environment, employees, all kinds of stuff, all going together with all of these other issues, if you will. So it's, and then of course, the big question is, should we have seen this coming? And you have organizations now, for example, in the United States, Aunt Jemima, and the syrup company now removing what has been for over 100 years a not very pleasant depiction of a part of the population. So we're going to come back to this on August 21st, and we're going to look at, is there any way to get any kind of grip on this? And we're going to have several organizations with us. Katrin and I will be leading it. And we already have Ulrika Haugen from DRVGL. You have to excuse me if I mispronounce this. Josephine Edvald Björklund from, was it Essity, which is a fast-moving consumer goods type of company. They sell health products and different kinds of things. So, and we're going to keep it Nordic, because is there a Nordic perspective on these things? And you can see from some of the exhibits here that there appears to be. So we're going to explore that. And what do the Nordic countries basically have to offer the rest of the world? So I would like to thank you very much from us, and I will turn you over to Susanna and Jesper, my colleagues, also from Sweden and Norway. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Peggy. Hello, everybody. So my name is Suzanne van Gils. I will actually shift the slides. And I will be telling you a little bit about the ethical side of this, and I'm doing this together with Jesper Falkheimer, who's with us from Lund. Do you want to say hello?
Yeah, maybe I should say hello. Hi, I'm Jesper Falkheimer. I'm a professor at Lund University in Sweden. I'm also an adjunct, or professor 2, it's called in Norway, at the University College of Christiania. Or Høgskolen Christiania, it's called in Norwegian. Thanks.
All right. My name is Suzanne van Gils, as I just said. I'm a lecturer in communication of leadership and ethics. So for me, that is like the core topic of today is highly interesting, both in terms of finding a Nordic perspective on this, but also in the broader sense of research on ethics. And when setting up this talk, we actually thought it might be, because ethics is such a broad concept, it might be good to start off a little bit of what does business ethics in communication mean? What do we understand as ethics in communication when we do research about this? So as a bit of background, generally researchers actually consider ethics in communication in terms of behaviors like discussing the organizational codes of conduct, addressing breaches of conduct, codes of ethics, discussing this with employees, and showing considerate behavior towards the employees, but also towards all the stakeholders. So some of the more explicit examples of this is, for example, companies like Starbucks, who have their ethical code on the wall in all of the companies. But there's also, like Peggy just said, in all the events that are going on, critical events in the media, where companies react by adjusting their company logo, for example. So there's a lot of related topics on ethics that are covered in communication in organizations. One really interesting finding that we will talk about today in the light of the findings from the ECM is ethical awareness. So it's repeatedly found in research that actually ethics become more of a topic the more people are aware of this. So to some extent, some companies also have ethical blindness. Like they think there's nothing going on simply because the focus is not on the ethical side of this, but maybe more on the performance side of this. So, and in that case, there might be a focus on other topics. And as there are many, many things going on at the same time, sometimes it's also difficult to find a priority there. So if we look at the results in general, so this is not split by country yet, we asked people in the ECM, how much of ethical challenges do you see in your day-to-day work and on a daily basis? And you can see in the graph that this has actually shifted compared to the results in 2012. 46% of the people who answered said, well, I see several ethical challenges in my work on a regular basis. And these can be all sorts of things. So it can be cyber crimes, it can be dealing with HR issues, it can be dealing with media responses, all of those things. More interesting is also, though, that 35% say there are no ethical challenges in my work. On a day-to-day basis, I don't face any ethical challenges. And we will discuss this a little bit, like what this could potentially mean. Before we do that, Jesper will tell us a bit about the different country results.
Yeah, definitely. There's a very strong connection to what Peggy and Katrine talked about the strategic issues here. So you could definitely say that ethical challenges are very much connected to strategic challenges and the whole issue about sustainability and standing up for what your organization believes in and so on. When we look at the Nordics and the European Communication Monitor, you can see that there is a difference. It's coming to some other countries close to us and the rest of the countries in the survey. As you can see here, the highest portion of practitioners without an ethical issue is the Nordic countries, Belgium and Germany, while countries such as Croatia, Portugal, and Poland are opposite. And one might, of course, discuss why is this so, and that might be one question for the Q&A, but one interpretation is that we have a rather institutionalized system in the Nordic countries with issues. We can see that in the in the next part of the presentation when it comes to what you rely on when it comes to ethical codes of conduct and so on. Still, there is, as Suzanne mentioned, an increase all over when it comes to ethical challenges among practitioners, also in Nordic countries. There are, of course, several reasons for this. The digital technologies is one very crucial one, where while practitioners have to work and defend their organizations towards cyber crime and disinformation and so forth. And there's also the aspect of sustainability, where what some people call the Greta generation, young people who are rather activist in their attitudes and behaviors, really demand that organizations and their leaders stand up for ethical standpoints in several ways. Yeah, we can change to the next picture there. That's Suzanne again, so back to you.
All right. So what we can actually see in terms of sources for ethical guidelines, when we ask the people like where do you look for advice? Where do you get to know what is the right thing to do? You can see that people actually report different types of guidelines. So there's the guidelines in the organization themselves, guidelines that come from the outside, from professional codes, and also people who rely on their personal values and their beliefs. And we know quite a bit actually on that people have different levels of moral personality, they have different values. But for organizations, it's actually beneficial if there's some kind of overarching framework, some kind of ethical guideline where they want to have most people stick to, so it's clear what people need to do. And Jesper, do you want to say something about the comparison between the Nordic countries here? You're muted.
Sorry, the technology. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can see statistics here that Nordic countries are rather similar, but we'll say that Denmark stands out a little bit when it comes to reliance on organizational ethical guidelines. We don't really have any answer why this is so, but it's kind of an interesting result if you compare it to the other countries. As mentioned, the personal values is the most important asset for practitioners, but there is a stronger reliance on formal sources all over. But it is a little bit different in the different countries here, so that might be an issue for further discussion. Thanks.
All right. So if we go to where people get these guidelines, we can see that people participated differently in training on communication of ethics. And this is a compilation of two different questions. So first, the question was, have you ever participated in training on communication of ethics? And then the next thing is, if people answered yes, then they also answered where they got this training. You can see a breakdown here for different types of organizations. So you can see that overall stock companies really stand out there in the middle when they say, well, I participated in ethics training by my organization. Of course, these type of trainings are often conducted by consultants, so smaller companies might be less likely to have done this training. So it's either ethics training in the organization, ethics training by a professional association. And if we look within companies, you can see that the higher up on the organizational ladder, people who are heads of communication very more often answer, well, yes, I have actually participated in a professional association. So this is like, these people might have like a more broader overview of what is there to get on the market. Unit leaders and also team members. So team members, you can see they report most strongly that they have had communication ethics during their studies. Unit leaders most often say, well, I've participated in ethics training in my organization. And if we add all that together on a little bit of, okay, what do we do with these findings? It starts to make sense that if overall about 25% of the people, maybe if we add it all up, 30 to 40% of the people says they have participated in ethics training. And you can see on the left-hand side that quite large amounts of people say that they never participated in ethics training. The people who never participated will be less likely to spot ethical issues when they come up. So it will be more difficult to deal with this. So on the agenda will be both to increase this training, but also just to put ethics on the agenda to talk about, because then these numbers will automatically go up. And I think with that, we're at the end of our time slot. Thank you very much. And I will like to hand over to Finn and Vinnie in Denmark, who will talk about the crisis perspective on communication.
So hello from Team Denmark, as we may call ourselves, because both Finn Frantzen and I are coming from Aarhus School of Business and Social Sciences at Aarhus University in Denmark. And our research field, if you want to say something.
Yes, our research field is crisis communication and crisis management. And we're going to focus on a little of this, but not exclusively.
Yeah. So we have named our presentation Living in an Age of Risk and Crisis, Cyber Attacks, Terrorism, Hijacking, and we may say pandemics. But what's next? So let us start. So what we think and what we have studied is what we name the risk society. People are so afraid of living in our societies nowadays. But we could also name it a crisis society, because we are experiences a lot of risks, but also a lot of threats and a lot of crises. And in fact, we are going to present the results from the European Communication Monitor, especially focused on cybersecurity issues. And it was quite interesting because that study was made here beginning of 2020, before the COVID. But in December, we had a small study made by the Danish Emergency Act, and they came up with this. The fear of cyber attacks was perceived by Danes to be the biggest threat, moving from 45% in 2017 to 54% in 2019. And then next, as the crisis type that was threatening mostly, people felt it was terrorism, security policy issues, floodings, oil spill, hurricanes and storms, food and water pollution, and very, very down the line, we found the disease outbreaks. And in fact, as we all know, in February, March, we got the COVID. But nevertheless, these numbers correspond quite well to with the European Crisis Communication Monitor. So some people actually claim that cyber attacks or cyber security matters are the new normal. If we look into the European Communication Monitor, we can see that major concerns of communication departments and agencies in the field of cybersecurity is actually that we are afraid that cyber criminals could hack the websites and or our social media accounts, or even worse, close down the total digital infrastructure. But let's take a look at the results from the European Communication Monitor. Now, first, people were asked about their views about the attention and awareness of cybersecurity as one of the topics that they have to deal with in their daily work. And in fact, 6 out of 10 practitioners confirm that it's relevant for their daily work. As you can see, 63% said, I have given attention to the debate about cybersecurity. And for the daily work, 59% said that it's very relevant for my work in my communication department or in my communication agency. And finally, as for the debate about cybersecurity in their home country, it is very much debated in my country, was what 55 or almost 56% claimed. But what is it then? What do we mean when we talk about cybersecurity? It is defined in the following way, that cybersecurity is about putting up a set of guidelines, technologies, but also training that provide protection of an organization's data and of its computer and digital communication infrastructure. So a lot of elements may fall into that category, and we will come back to that in a little while. Now, if we look for the awareness, who are the people, who are the communication people who have the biggest awareness within this field? And as you can see, it is the joint stock companies, and it is the governmental organizations, 68% and 67%. Whereas the private and the non-profit and the consultancies and agencies apparently are lacking a little behind. So how can this be explained? But we will come back to this. For the cybersecurity discussions in Europe, it was very striking to see, if you take a look at this result, that people from Northern Europe and from Western Europe were the ones who have discussed cybersecurity mostly, whereas in Southern Europe or in Eastern Europe, as you can see, it doesn't seem to be that important as a topic. So this is quite interesting. Why do we have such a big difference? We don't know at this point in time, but of course we would very much like to look into it. But at least we know that, for instance, in the Nordic countries, with our welfare systems, discussing this among, for instance, governmental agencies and institutions, it has become very important. And it may be linked to the experiences that people have had with cybersecurity issues. Now, if you take a look at this one, more than half of the communication professionals in Europe have experienced cyber attacks or incidents of data theft in their own organization. That's quite a lot. You could say, well, 26% have only experienced this once, and 27% has experienced it multiple times. But almost 46%, meaning less than half, have never had an attack yet. But here we may remember that even if you have not had an attack, if a topic has been discussed very broadly in a society, it is more a matter of the perception. Sometimes it's a matter of the perception. For instance, we did a study on crisis types that people were perceiving as being the most threatening back in 2004 in Denmark. And what came up was terrorism. But if you remember in 2004 in Europe, well, the only example of huge terrorism was actually the 9/11. So no company in the Nordic countries or no people had experienced terrorism, but still it came out as the biggest threat. So even if you have had no experiences with this, you may still perceive it and in that case, work with it as a crisis type that you need to deal with. Now, just to illustrate, in June 27, 2017, we had what you could maybe call worst case scenario. Because, I mean, cyber attacks goes from hijacking a social media site of a company. And of course, communication people have to deal with it. But it may also influence the total administrative digital system of a company. And in that case, it's really a bad situation. So in June 2017, in June 27, 2017, more than 230,000 computers in more than 150 countries were attacked by the ransomware virus Pitaya. And it caused a total breakdown of all administrative systems and communication in the attacked international companies. To name a few, you had the Danish company Maersk, but you also had FedEx, etc. And take a look at the picture to the left. This is actually, as you can see, all of the Maersk terminals, computers that were hit by this breakdown. It meant that the ships, the container ships of Maersk, they couldn't get in contact, they didn't know where to deliver their goods, etc., etc. So that was a huge cyber attack. One of our students did a study in one of these international companies that were hit by this back in June 2017. So they did a case study. And what the company told was actually that the very, very largest challenge of all of it was the loss of internal and external communication. Nothing worked, no phone system, the SIAP system, emails, intranet, everything went down. And they were to deliver goods to their customers, to their partners, and they couldn't get into any of it for 3 weeks. Imagine 3 weeks. It's very costful and very stressful. So what we learned from the case study, they had to improvise because they had not prepared. They did prepare for a business continuity management if one of their computer systems went down, but not for a total breakdown like this one. So they had to improvise a lot, finding out what kind of communication solution could they come up with, and for the internal communication as well. And the thing that functioned best was physical daily crisis meetings. But you can only do that, can you not, if you are actually located in the same locations. But anyway, so it was a shock to them, and afterwards they have now completely changed their plans for cybersecurity. But what they found out was that due to their way of communicating before this, it became a matter of resilience, that they were actually able to quickly find new solutions, and they were ready to try every kind of change to make this working again. But communication was central to all this.
Yes, our last topic is focused on crisis management and crisis communication, or to be even more specific, it's focused on the Nordic perspective on crisis management. I think you all know that for years we have been talking about a special way of managing and organizing in the Nordic countries. It is something that we have been proud of for a very long time. But so far, nobody has really studied if this is also the case within the fields of crisis management and crisis communication. And we thought that NOAH would be the right framework for doing such a study. Immediately, when you hear the question for the first time, is there a difference between Norwegian and Swedish and Finnish crisis management and crisis communication on one side and the Danish, for example, on the other side? I think most of you would say they are probably quite similar. And but if you take a look at what has happened, for example, during the Corona crisis, you will see that there are a lot of differences too. For example, take Sweden and Denmark, and you will see that there are some very profound differences, and this is reflected in the way the political discourse and the political debate takes place, especially in Sweden. Yes, we will do a lecture. We will do a lecture on November 19, where we will focus on this because we find it very important to see if we can uncover some of these similarities and differences.
Yeah, So just to end up, we are looking forward to participating in these NORA lectures. We think it's a wonderful opportunity to discuss and debate very relevant and urgent topics with the professional community. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you all. Thanks to all our panelists for delving into these important strategic issues for communications and communication management for us. Let's take our final session of today to get into the Q&A, pick up some of the questions that we have gotten through the Q&A function. Thank you all for those who have provided us with some input there. Maybe since we just heard you, Finn and Vinny, back to Denmark, a question from Lars regarding your topic of cybersecurity. Specifically, a very pragmatic question. So how to get from policies to actual awareness and behavior in organizations. So when I think about our own institution, BI Norwegian Business School, we had this huge thing with GDPR, and this was coming for a semester, 2 semesters, but people weren't moving. So then they gamified the whole thing around the policy to get people to play around with the different rules and get people engaged. So I guess this question goes really into this direction. How do you come from policies to behavior when it comes around also organizational culture? So yeah. Question for you.
Well, I would say that this is an obvious element of change management and change communication. It's not enough just to do information dissemination, to tell people what to do by means of sending out guidelines and stuff like that. You need to practice it. But how can you practice it? And will people want to practice it? I mean, the best thing to do if you are thinking of crisis is actually to do a crisis simulation. Because once you have tried it, you know what it's all about. At our business school, we had a bomb threat, and we were running out because we really thought that it was a bomb. It turned out to be a simulation, but people learned so much from that, so they actually started changing their behavior. So I think it's a matter of a combination of course, informing about how to do, giving out instructions, but also to make it make sense to people. So you need to practice it and actually to get it under the hood, as we say in Denmark, under the skin, I think would be the correct answer. Yeah, that was a short answer, but I hope it will do.
Excellent. Thanks. Thank you, Vinny, and thanks for the question. Maybe to stick with the crisis, with the cyber tech topic for one more question. So one additional question for you guys here is when we get an increasing number of cyber attacks, when cyber attacks maybe become the new normal, how does that really change what the communication function does? How does that impact on a strategic level the communication function in an organization?
Well, one could claim that the differences will be the same as the difference between the old book and the homepage. There's a lot of differences between digital communication and analog communication. And basically, a lot of these differences, we'll meet them again in such a setting.
But I think you will actually have all of the roles, strategic roles of the communicator in one. I mean, you have to be a good advisor here, but you also have to be the one taking the decisions. If you look at, for instance, the global attack, cyber attack that accompanied our case study that we did, it was clear right from the start that the head of that crisis management team turned in to be the communicator, because it was all about communication. It was all, of course, it was also about technical systems and IT people working on the programming and stuff like that. But it was the communicator who had to take care, who had to take the decisions, who had to coordinate, and who had to make sure both internally and externally that everything worked. So it's really stressful, but it means that all of your competences actually are involved at one at the same time. So we need to be a Blæksprutte.
All right. Thank you both. Moving on to the ethics team with one of the questions we got here. Specifically, nice question, because what we want to be is regionally relevant, right? Relevant to the Nordics. A question about the ethics topic. Specifically, how do we link the dimension of sort of the practical ethical guidelines, the policies, and on the one hand, and cultural dimensions of ethics on the other hand, maybe specifically talking about the Nordic region? Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you for that question, very interesting. So I would say when it comes to culture, you have, of course, culture within a specific organization, as well as culture like in the Nordics compared to other places. We know that when it comes to national cultures, there's big differences in, for example, things like compliance, but also in terms of how much people are hierarchical, how much things are brought up bottom up or top down. So culture definitely plays a large role in that, and I think from what we can see in the Nordics, if like very egalitarian cultures mean that ethical cultures in organizations, and these ethical guidelines are often created much more together organically, more than brought kind of top down to the people. But maybe Jesper also wants to say something about this.
No, no, it was a good answer. I'm fine.
All right. So yeah, there's just different angles. We plan to we forgot to say this, but we plan to unpack the topic of ethics as well in a larger lecture in September this year, where we go into detail.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you, Susanne. We have another ethics question, so we can pass that then over to our colleague in Sweden. So one thing we've seen in the data that you presented is that communication professionals in the Nordics seem to rely a lot more than other communication professionals across Europe on formal codes and formal guidelines. Can you comment a little bit on that? What does that say about communications in the Nordics specifically?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if we compare to the crisis management issues, which there seems to be some differences between the Nordic countries, here there seems to be some similarities when it comes to following guidelines and codes of conduct and so on, at least saying that you do. There's a big difference between talking and acting here, as we've been into. But I think you have to go into some kind of societal explanation to understand this. I mean, the Nordic countries, as well as Germany and Belgium, which also rank high in this question when it comes to following formal guidelines and so on. They're all welfare societies, with rather strong institutions. I think we're pretty good in the Nordic countries to build and relate to strong governmental and also some self-made ethical institutions in different ways. And I think it might be a little bit different in other countries which don't have as strong institutional systems as we have in our countries. That might be one explanation at least, but it's worth to dig deeper into this. We should also say that the difference is not that amazing. So there is a difference, but it's not too big.
All right. Thank you, Jesper. And over with a question to the team on strategic issues. So Katrin and Peggy, very pragmatically, if we see all this urgency behind these issues, who are very polarized, who seem to be getting more fast pace, how do communication departments keep up with monitoring and responding to these emerging social, societal issues?
Yeah, that's the key question right there. And I think it's really important that we divide these issues into, sort of like, Finn and Vinny talked about, crises that are really sort of catastrophe, types of crises. But a lot of these you can prepare for. Natural disasters, everybody knows when a hurricane's coming because they start at the same time every year. June, everybody's on alert for hurricanes in South Florida, for example. And foodborne issues, which wasn't very important or was laid down the list. If you're in the food industry, you're more likely to have something happen to you than if you're in another industry. So you're in a position to have these things happen to you possibly. But when you have things that are on a more societal basis, we're sort of back to the cultural issue. What's important, to our society? What the Black Lives Matter translate into the Nordic countries, for example? Is it a non-issue? And I would argue that it is an issue in the Nordic countries, but maybe a different kind of issue in the Nordic countries. And failure to pick up on these things results in pretty damaging impact on an organization's reputation. So, Aunt Jemima changing their logo 100 years later for something that they knew all along, for those 100 years was offensive. You don't win on situations like that. So how can we, sort of translate? So we hope we'll be able to come with some tools that can help organizations when we come back in August and have a little bit more time. Katrin, you have a word on that?
Yes, I can add, because we also got another question in the chat. Do you think that CSR will become even more important aspect for communications following the COVID crisis? And actually you, Peggy, started off by saying that, and I think we really think that it's an issue. I will say that communication really has an important role to help both organizations and societies tackle these extreme challenges that we are facing with the climate, with health pandemics, and so on in the future. So I think that sustainable development issues and CSR issues will be even more important. Mm-hmm. And also to think about that it's not just CSR and protecting your brand, because that can always backfire in these greenwashing discussions. Mm-hmm. So I think really that sustainable development will be even more important in the future, as we can see in this trend. We come back to that.
Yeah. Of course, back to Peggy.
I was going to say, this is linked to everything we've been discussing today. It's an ethical issue, the inability to see these things, by management. And it always boils down to management. It's management's responsibility. They have to take responsibility for it. And I think we know, Finn and Vindy, that the most damage is done after the crisis and how management handles it. Are they forthright, are they honest, are they authentic, these sorts of things. So hopefully we'll be able to bring more of the management aspect into these types of things that we've been discussing among communicators for a long time, but getting those other managers in, that's our challenge. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate the ability to do that through this.
Yeah, excellent segue also to slowly wrap this up. Great session, and I think that's really one key mission that we try to work on as a group, is really link communication with management issues. I think and hope that everybody got that from the webinar today, that this is about addressing strategic issues for communicators that are very close to organizational purpose, organizational strategy. So making this bridge work. Maybe we can go back to Fredrik, to the info reel to wrap this up, so we can show also upcoming events. So as you know, this is the first of a series of Neura online lectures, and I hope we got everybody today interested in tuning into upcoming lectures throughout the year, where we get part of this team, part of the Neura research team, together with communication executives. So to discuss more specifically on some of the topics we have highlighted today. Additionally, we have also the topic of expectation management of two of our colleagues coming up later in the year who couldn't join us today. So please save the date and register for those events. And if you're interested in what we do and participating in our sort of dissemination, but also research projects, please go to the website. Get in touch with the group. We're always looking for more interested both practitioners, executives specifically, and researchers in the region that help us a little bit to build this platform for our Nordic region. And on that topic, also maybe one call to action when it comes to the ECM, the European Communication Monitor. So as you know, this is an annual study, And our ability to interpret trends in the Nordic region, to deliver insight and to contribute to the professionalization of the field hinges also on everybody's contribution to the survey. So this comes up every year, mid-January, between mid-January and mid-February. So if you see the link for the survey coming up, please participate, take a moment to support us with delivering robust data for the Nordic region, and this will allow us to do this even better. Thank you to all our panelists for today. I look forward to seeing you back in the individual lectures and for greater roundtables in the future for our research workshops and so on. It's been a pleasure seeing you here online. And with that, I think we're going to close the session for today, and I will look forward to seeing you next time.